صباح الخير ست دينا، عم تسمعيني؟
Yes, I can hear you. Yes. Can you hear me?
بليز ممكن تضوي الكاميرا تبع حضرتك؟ ماشي اوكي.
Okay. شايفني؟
كل واحد بيحكي. اوكي شكرا لحضرتك، شكرا.
Mm.
Nora, shall I start? Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm just checking if you can hear me. Okay. Can you hear me now? It's good. It's good. Nora, shall I start? Can we? Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm just checking if you can hear me. Okay. Can you hear me now? It's good. It's good. Okay, thank you. So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for the session Climate Security in the Arab States, Lessons Learned and Scaling Up. My name is Nuran Atif. I'm the regional lead for Africa and the morning, everyone. I'm just checking if you can hear me. Okay. Can you hear me now? That was me. It's good. Okay, thank you. So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for the session Climate Security in the Arab States, Lessons Learned and Scaling Up. My name is Nuran Atif. I'm the regional lead for Africa and the morning, everyone. I'm just checking if you can hear me. It's playing again. Can you hear me now? That was me. It's good. Okay, thank you. So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for the session Climate Security in the Arab States, Lessons Learned and Scaling Up. My name is Nuran Atif. I'm the regional lead for Africa and the morning, everyone. I'm just checking if you can hear me. It's playing again. Can you hear me now? That was good. Okay, thank you. So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for the session Climate Security in the Arab States, Lessons Learned and Scaling Up. My name is Nuran Atif. I'm the regional lead for Africa and the morning, everyone. I'm just checking if you can hear me. It's playing again. Can you hear me now? That was good. Okay, thank you. So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for the session Climate Security in the Arab States, Lessons Learned and Scaling Up. My name is Nuran Atif. I'm the regional lead for Africa and the morning, everyone. I'm just checking if you. Yeah, but can you hear me now? Yeah, exactly. عشان ممكن يبقى اللايف ستريمينج نفسه. Thank you. So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for the session Climate Security on the Arab States.
We're very sorry about this.
Scaling
We will
up.
be starting shortly.
My name is Sarah. I'm the regional lead for Arstosa, and good morning, everyone. I'm just checking it.
Yeah, exactly. عشان ممكن يبقى اللايف ستريم نفسه.
Thank you so much for joining us today for the session Climate Security on the Arab States.
We're very sorry about this.
Scaling
We'll
up.
be starting shortly.
My name is Sarah. I'm the regional lead for Arstosa, and good morning, everyone. I'm just checking it.
Yeah, exactly. عشان ممكن يبقى اللايف ستريم نفسه.
He's trying to figure out what's causing this. We'll get back to you as soon as possible.
But just let us know, give us a cue to start. We're very sorry about
Words scaling up. My name is Sarah. I'm the regional lead for Arstosa, and good morning, everyone. I'm just checking it.
Yeah, exactly. عشان ممكن يبقى اللايف ستريم نفسه.
He's trying to figure out what's causing this. We'll get back to you as soon as possible.
But just let us know, give us a cue to start. We're very sorry about
Words scaling up. My name is Sarah. I'm the regional lead for Arstosa, and good morning, everyone. I'm just checking it.
Yeah, exactly. عشان ممكن يبقى اللايف ستريم نفسه.
He's trying to figure out what's causing this. We'll get back to you as soon as possible.
But just let us know, give us a cue to start. We're very sorry about
Words scaling up. My name is Sarah. I'm the regional lead for Arstosa, and good morning, everyone. I'm just checking it.
Yeah, exactly. عشان ممكن يبقى اللايف ستريم نفسه.
He's trying to figure out what's causing this. We'll get back to you as soon as possible.
But just let us know, give us a cue to start. We're very sorry about
Words scaling up. My name is Sarah. I'm the regional lead for Arstosa, and good morning, everyone. I'm just checking it.
Yeah, exactly. عشان ممكن يبقى اللايف ستريم نفسه.
He's trying to figure out what's causing this. We'll get back to you as soon as possible.
But just let us know, give us a cue to start. We're very sorry about
Words scaling up. My name is Sarah. I'm the regional lead for Arstosa, and good morning, everyone. I'm just checking it.
So yeah, I think it's working now. Dina, can you hear us?
Translated also.
and also the translation.
Yes, I can hear.
Great, thank you so much. So apologies everyone for the technical issue, but I think we're back on track, and I think by now everyone is sure of the name of the session. So thank you again for joining. And as mentioned, my name is Nouran Atif. I'm the regional lead for Africa and the Middle East at the UN Environment Programme Finance Initiative, UNEP-FI, and I'm pleased to be moderating today's session. So today's session is actually brought to you today by the SDG Climate Facility Project, which is a multi-partner project that addresses the nexus between climate action and human security in the Arab region. It is a multi-partner project that brings together a number of UN agencies, including the UN Development Programme, the World Food Programme, the UN Disaster Risk and Reduction, UN Habitat, and of course UNEP-FI, but also the League of Arab States and the Arab Water Council. And the project is funded by the generous contribution of the Swedish government by SIDA. So as we all know that the Arab region is highly susceptible to climate change impacts, and we see the rising of temperature that is causing a number of adverse effects such as droughts, exacerbating social vulnerability, environmental fragility, and others. In other words, basically, it is threatening human security. It is also great that in the Arab region, last year and this year, we have both COP events happening in the region, COP27 and COP28 happening this year at the UAE. And this is going to be very helpful to advance the negotiations on climate. However, it is very important that this is also coupled by innovation and initiatives that are essential to move forward into action and implementation. Of course, there is a need for the Arab region specifically to scale up climate finance to build resilience and enhance the region's adaptive capacity, particularly when it comes to food and water systems, women in climate action, and recovery solutions. Our session today is going to discuss scaling up climate security nexus based on experiences from the field, research and innovation in the Arab region. And we will be sharing with you good case practices, lessons learned to advance innovation, and integrated approaches that can bring multiple benefits across the SDGs, but also on climate aspects. I'm very pleased to be joined today by a group of highly distinguished speakers and experts. And I will present to you our panel speakers, Dr. Amal Azab, the SDG Climate Facility Coordinator at the Arab Water Council, Mr. Oscar Ektal, the Regional Head for Resilience and Livelihood, Cairo Regional Bureau for the Middle East and North Africa, Ms. Paola Pagliani, Regional Program Coordinator at the UN Development Programme, Regional Hub for the Arab States, Dr. Nadeem Farjallah, Director of Climate Change and Environmental Programme at Issam Fares Institute of Public Policy and International Affairs at the American University of Beirut, and Dr. Wadid Al-Ayyan, a Senior Advisor for Sustainable Development at the League of Arab States. But I'm also very pleased that we have opening remarks that are also going to be provided by Her Excellency Dr. Nada Al-Aghizi, Director of Sustainable Development and International Cooperation at the League of Arab States, Dr. Dina Assaf, UN Resident Coordinator at the United Arab Emirates, and Ms. Maria Celine, also Head of Regional Development Cooperation in the Middle East and North Africa, the Swedish Embassy in Jordan, to provide also the closing remarks. Without further ado, I would hand over to Dr. Nada, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Nouran. Sorry, excuse me, because I have a bad cold. أنا بعتذر لأن عندي صوتي يعني تعبان شوية. برحب بحضراتكم جميعا في هذه الجلسة المميزة، وبرحب طبعا بشركائنا المتميزين من منظمات الأمم المتحدة المختلفة، وأيضا من الجامعة الأمريكية ببيروت، وأيضا شركائنا من سيدا، واللي بنشكرهم بشكل خاص على تمويلهم لهذا المشروع الناجح في رأيي. واسمحوا لي أن أبدأ ببعض الكلمات الافتتاحية. السيدات والسادة، يشهد العالم ومنطقتنا على وجه الأخص تسارعاً متزايداً في التطورات المتعلقة بقضايا المناخ، كما يكتسب ملف الأمن المناخي كل يوم شركاء جدد، ويفتح آفاقاً جديدة للتحرك في اتجاه دعم الدول العربية في قضايا تتسم بالسرعة في التغير والعمق في التأثير. ويشكل تغير المناخ أحد أهم التحديات التي واجهتها الدول العربية على الإطلاق، إذ تعتبر المنطقة واحدة من أهم البؤر المتأثرة بتغير المناخ في العالم، حيث يتسبب تغير المناخ في تصاعد وتوسيع آثار ظاهرة الجفاف وارتفاع مستوى سطح البحر والتصحر، مما يعيق الإنتاجية الزراعية ويدفع أسعار الغذاء إلى الارتفاع، ويؤثر بشكل خطير على الأمن الغذائي. وفي عام 2021 عانى ما يقرب من 141 مليون شخص في جميع أنحاء العالم من خطر من مستوى معتدل إلى شديد من العالم في مجال الأمن الغذائي. ومنذ عام 2000 ازداد الجوع في جميع أنحاء العالم بنسبة 91%، مما أثر على كل البلدان الغنية والفقيرة، وكذلك البلدان المتضررة من النزاعات والبلدان التي تعيش في سلام. ونظراً لما تسببه الحرب الروسية الأوكرانية من آثار سلبية، فقد يواجه العالم فترة طويلة من نقص القمح وارتفاع الشديد في الأسعار، مما يزيد من مخاطر انعدام الأمن الغذائي ويثقل كاهل النمو العالمي. وبالنظر إلى تنوع الأحداث المناخية وحدتها وشدتها المتزايدة وتأثيرها على الناس والمجتمعات، تحتاج الحكومات والمجتمع الدولي إلى منهجيات تحليلية وتخطيطية تمكنها من إدارة تعقيد وحجم ونطاق التحديات التي يتسبب فيها تغير المناخ. واعتماداً على مدى الاضطراب المناخي، من المتوقع أن تؤدي عواقب تغير المناخ إلى تفاقم الأوضاع الحرجة الموجودة بالفعل في المنطقة العربية، وأن تشكل عاملاً مضاعفاً للمخاطر على الأمن الإنساني والاستقرار السياسي. لذا فقد أصبح من الضروري الآن البحث عن حلول مستدامة تأخذ في اعتبارها أبعاد الأمن الإنساني وآثاره على تحقيق التنمية المستدامة، خاصة في المنطقة العربية التي مرت بعقد مضى اتسم بتنامي النزاعات وعدم الاستقرار. وفي إطار مساعي الجامعة العربية لمعالجة القضايا المتعلقة بتغير المناخ وأزمات الغذاء المرتبطة به في سياق زيادة الصراع والضعف الاجتماعي في المنطقة العربية، أطلقنا الورقة البيضاء حول المبادرة الإقليمية للأمن المناخي في المنطقة العربية خلال قمة المناخ 27 COP 27 بشرم الشيخ، والتي تحدد نطاق تغير المناخ وعواقبه في المنطقة مع وضع أجندة استجابة إرشادية. وتسلط الورقة الضوء على المجالات ذات الأولوية المتعلقة بالبيانات والمعلومات والتمويل الكافي، والحاجة إلى إشراك وانخراط الدول الأعضاء وأصحاب المصلحة في تفعيل جدول أعمال الاستجابة على المستويين الوطني والمحلي. تتضمن الورقة وصفاً للتدفقات الرئيسية وركائز الإطار الاستراتيجي وشكل خطة العمل والعديد من المشاريع الإقليمية، بالإضافة إلى نتائج أنشطة مرفق المناخ لأهداف التنمية المستدامة في المنطقة العربية، وكذلك جميع الأنشطة المناخية ذات الصلة في البرامج الأخرى. وتشمل الورقة البيضاء الخاصة بالمبادرة أهم المجالات والأنشطة والمشاريع التي تم مناقشتها خلال ورش العمل الخاصة بالتحضير والإعداد للمبادرة والتي عقدت في 2022، وتعمل على تقديم حلول للتحديات الرئيسية، ومن المقترح تنفيذها بالتنسيق والتكامل الكامل كأساس للمبادرة من أجل تهيئة بيئة تساعد بشكل أكبر على الاستثمار في المنطقة العربية بهدف تطوير وتنفيذ حلول مستدامة للأمن الإنساني. السيدات والسادة، تجدر الإشارة هنا إلى أننا قمنا بعقد 4 ورش عمل بمشاركة ممثلي الدول العربية وعدد من الشركاء الدوليين والإقليميين، بالإضافة إلى شركائنا من مرفق المناخ للتنمية المستدامة. كما تبنت اللجنة العربية للتنمية المستدامة بنداً دائماً حول المبادرة الإقليمية للأمن المناخي على جدول أعمالها بصورة دائمة لبحث واستعراض آخر مستجدات هذه المبادرة. ونستهدف خلال الفترة القادمة تعزيز التعاون مع الشركاء بشأن هذه المبادرة لدخولها حيز التنفيذ ووضع إطار عمل لها بحلول كوب 28 يتم استعراضه خلال أعمال هذا المؤتمر، والذي سيعقد في دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة. وقبلها سنعقد فعاليات الأسبوع العربي للتنمية المستدامة في نسخته الخامسة، وستخصص خلاله جلسة لوضع إطار عمل لصالح المبادرة الإقليمية للأمن الأمن المناخي في المنطقة العربية، وذلك بالتعاون والتنسيق مع جميع شركائنا. وفي النهاية لا يسعني سوى أن أتقدم لكم بوافر الشكر والتقدير على تواجدكم ومشاركتكم معنا اليوم، والذي يعكس مدى اهتمامكم وحرصكم على تقديم الدعم للمبادرات الإقليمية في سبيل تعزيز قدرة الدول العربية في مساعيها لتحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة وأيضاً أهداف تحقيق الأمن الإنساني في المنطقة. شكراً لكم.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nada, for your remarks. Dr. Dina, I also hand over to you for your virtual intervention. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And apologies, I couldn't be with you in Beirut. I also am having a cold as I had to come back to the UAE for their national launch of COP28. But let me also move to my formal remarks. Your Excellency, Dr. Nada Riz El Ghazi, Director of Sustainable Development and International Cooperation, League of Arab States, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to address you today to discuss this important issue of climate security in the Arab region. As we all know, our region is most stressed and impacted by climate change. Just under 90% of our region's total population experiences varying levels of water scarcity, and 50 million do not have access to clean drinking water. This situation is dire and most pressing, especially considering the multiple shocks that make it worse for all of us. So I would like to take this opportunity to share 3 key messages to inform your discussion. The first message is on the adaptation measures necessary to adjust to this new reality. The Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda that emerged from COP27 calls for creating smart, efficient, and integrated water management systems. These systems are desperately needed in our region as we deal with more water stress and harsh climate realities. To give you an example of this stress, USQA estimated that household water consumption increased by 5% in 2021 in the Arab region, owing to the need for frequent and lengthy hand washing in response to the pandemic. If washing your hands dents your water consumption by this much, you can imagine the plight of the most vulnerable. This brings me to my second message about financing adaptation measures. Financing is an unavoidable necessity across the region to bolster security and well-being. UNEP's Adaptation Gap Report for last year indicates that the world's annual adaptation needs are expected to increase to 160 to 340 billion by 2030 and 315 to 565 billion by 2050. Unfortunately, the reality is that many countries in our region will not be able to fully finance their adaptation needs, and therefore are likely to experience continued pressures, vulnerabilities, and potential instability as a result of limited adaptation capacity. My third message focuses on our collective preparedness for exacerbated climate and water stress on our societies. This requires actions by all segments of society to adopt and implement coherent measures in disaster risk reduction, anticipatory humanitarian action, early warning systems, and contingency measures to help manage repeated and more intense climate shocks, particularly on the most vulnerable. The UN family in the UAE is playing an important role in this regard, given our role in servicing the operational needs of the United Nations humanitarian action around the world. Agencies in the UAE are expanding their logistical and warehousing capacities with life-saving humanitarian supplies, as well as building the infrastructure for responding to increasing needs as the planet warms. This is an unfortunate reality. However, we must do our best and all we can to prevent the loss of life and mitigate the worst impact. I would like to further stress the necessity of whole of society engagement, mobilizing everyone, sparing no effort, and bringing forward our brightest ideas and solutions. On this note, I would like to emphasize the centrality of engaging young people in climate action. Succeeding generations will continue to face the worst impacts of climate change, and we have a key responsibility to guarantee them a secure and prosperous future. Today, the Secretary General will announce his next Youth Advisory Group on climate change, and we look forward to more young voices playing leadership roles for our people and planet. In fact, in yesterday's national launch for COP28, the UAE government has indicated that they will be launching a youth delegates initiative or program specifically to ensure that youth are on the table and the decision making and discussions during COP28. So these types of initiatives are very much welcome. And as we speak of COP28, as it's taking place at the end of this year in the UAE, we must marshal our ambition to strengthen international cooperation and collaborations in support of climate action. A key hallmark for COP28 is that it will include both the global stocktake discussions and the progress that has been made in implementing the Paris Agreement, as well as the global goal on adaptation, among other deliverables necessary for climate security. Thank you for the opportunity to address you, and I wish you a fruitful discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dina, Dr. Nada. So as you both mentioned, the region absolutely is facing a lot of climate stress, and there is a need for all the planning, cooperation, and also looking that this does not only affect us, but indeed the future generations, as you rightly mentioned. And there are a lot of talks also on adaptation and the role of the financial institutions and private sector in a wider context. With that said, let's look at also what is the scene in the Arab region? How are things actually happening? So if we start by identifying also the regional needs and what are the findings through the different initiatives that my colleagues on the panel are also working on. I would start my first question to address you, Dr. Amal. So research, of course, and as we are all speaking, the climate change impacts and looking at how it affects also the social aspect, so causing the challenges that undermine social cohesion, leading to social vulnerability, particularly for women. So would you please tell us more about the recent social vulnerability study that you were working on, and if you can share with us some of the key highlights that look at the impacts of climate change in the region? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nuran, and welcome everybody. It's a pleasure and honor to be representing the Arab Water Council. I hope you can hear me. As one of the partners of the SDG Climate Facility Project, which I find a unique partnership between different organizations that complement the work and effort of each other to deal with the climate change impacts in the Arab region. Coming directly to your question, the Arab Water Council was entitled with several studies focusing on climate security in the Arab region. One of these studies is the social vulnerability study related to the impacts of climate change. Actually, the reason to conduct this study is to test the methodology of multidisciplinary approach in dealing with climate risk management, especially focusing on social vulnerability and marginal groups who are facing tremendous impacts of climate change, whether it is droughts or floods. The study was specifically dealing with the impact of droughts, and we had this study implemented in Jordan as one of the most affected countries with water scarcity. Different angles were tackled in this study, and the main target was to test the methodology that can be implemented in studying the impact of climate change on social vulnerability in other countries in the region. I would like to hint that we worked on the ground to the level of communities. So this is what is new about the study, because we know that there are a lot of efforts in the Arab region dealing with climate change impacts and also dealing with the vulnerabilities. But our work, we consider it complementing, focusing on the communities and trying to map the different risks in the region. We started by Jordan, as I mentioned, because of the time limitation and also the fund limitation. But of course, we are grateful and thankful to CEDA for supporting this research as part of the other studies conducted under the SDG facility project. I may highlight some of the findings or what we saw in this research. First, that climate impacts are increasing the social risks in Jordan. Specifically, we were dealing with one of the communities that not only facing drought as one of the severe impacts, but also facing the refugees coming to the region, and they need to also be adapted. Limited resources, there was a severe problem of getting access to water and also to get access to, I would say, social support in the terms of education and health. We noticed also that people were suffering from being forced to go into the loans side. They had to get loans to survive. They lost their agricultural land, they lost their livestock. This is because of the complexity of the drought as one of the climate change impacts. I would say also that people were in favor to go for natural-based solutions. We had dialogues with the communities living in the study area, and they mentioned that they need to get support to have, let's say, examples of non-conventional water resources like water harvesting. They already have an ancient setup there in Deir el-Kaf. Deir el-Kaf is one of the case study that we went for, and they wanted to revive this kind of setup in collaboration with the Ministry of Water Resources, but also with the support of the Ministry of Social Development. We brought actually these ministries with the communities in dialogue that we held in Jordan, and we discussed the possible solutions. So I would say that one of the key findings of the study is that we came back to communities to discuss solutions that can fit their needs. And we brought the different stakeholders who were eager to support, but we needed to conduct maybe further work, and maybe I would keep this to my second intervention. I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amal, for that. And I think it's very important. One of the words that you said at the very beginning was multidisciplinary. And I think it's very important that we highlight this aspect, because the climate problem does not affect only one area. It actually has impact across different sectors, across different areas. And it's very interesting what you mentioned, also looking at the solutions and bringing different stakeholders on board and to discuss all that. So now that we have identified the problem specifically with the drought issues, I go to you, Oscar, also speaking about drought and seeing that the World Food Programme is working on a number of things, also addressing this issue and seeing how climate change is affecting the region, and you're experiencing that through the work. So can you tell us, like, how are you working with humanitarian action while building resilience towards future impact of climate change so that we can enhance the resilience against these challenges?
Okay, thanks a lot. Hope everybody can hear me. So very happy to be here. So I'm from the World Food Programme. And many of you probably know already, but we're in the midst of a global food crisis. There's been several joint statements by WFP, FAO, the World Bank, IMF. You know, year on year, things are getting worse. We're talking about 350 million or so that are acutely food insecure, which actually is a double from 2020. And about 43 million of those are at risk of famine. So it's a really dire situation. In the MENA region, we estimate that there's about 50 million food insecure people. WFP this year is aiming to reach about 37 million of those. And, you know, we're in a room here, and I imagine that most of us are quite, you know, privileged, but so we can't even imagine this. But if we look at food prices, for example, maybe, you know, you can take a second to just guess how much has the food prices increased in a country like Syria from, you know, 2022 January to January this year. It's over 100%. If we look at from December 2019, it's over 1,000% food price increase. Lebanon, another case in point, we're talking about a 2,000 increase since December 2019. And of course, this is not happening in isolation. People are losing jobs at the same time, higher tension and so on and so forth. It's a really dire situation out there. And of course, this is caused, in this region by conflict, unfortunately, but also by lingering effects of COVID. And then climate is making all of this much, much more difficult and much worse. In 2022, for the World Food Programme, our budget was $5.4 billion, which was a record high. And, of course, from our perspective, that's not sustainable. It's not sustainable for, those that are providing that finance either. It's not sustainable for the communities that we are supporting. So part of the question that you're asking is really about how can we use that financing smarter? How can we, meet shorter term needs while also contributing to longer term challenges? So I want to talk about maybe three things. First, about the humanitarian development peace nexus. Then I want to talk a little bit about food systems and particularly how we can build resilient food systems. And then as part of the contribution from SIDA, we work quite a lot on anticipatory action, which I'll explain a bit more. So just on the humanitarian development peace nexus, which I think is a way for humanitarian actors to really try and connect these different pieces and do more with our financing. One of the ways that we can do that is in our operations. Traditionally we use in-kind food. So we provide food to people. In this region, last year, we provided $1.2 billion in cash, which means that we're actually trying to support the local economies so that, small businesses and people have a higher choice in terms of their food, but also that we're stimulating local economies. And of course, even though the 37 million people that we assist or that we plan to assist in this region for this year, the majority of that is, cash or food, but we also support on average every year about 1.2 million people in reestablishing the livelihoods, working at community level to rehabilitate the irrigation system, making sure that people have access to, the market that they need to sell the produce in, that we can work on value chain addition so that people can sell at higher prices and so on and so forth. And then, of course, in this region, as most of you know, because there is conflict, we have to do that with a very strong conflict sensitivity angle. And that's also where we see some contributions to peace. If we're able to restore and make water, for example, more accessible, we can have an impact on local tension between communities. In Yemen, there's some estimates that say that 70% of local tension and local conflict is because of water. So if we can address those issues at a local level, we can actually contribute to stability. So those are some of the things that we can do under humanitarian development peace nexus. If we talk about resilient food systems, which I think is something that is coming up quite strongly and of course has been discussed here also in this forum, in Lebanon, we have a very interesting project which is called the Food System Challenge, and it has a relief window and also a resilience window. And in the immediate aftermath of the Beirut blast, we supported, very small micro businesses, so businesses with 10 people or less employed, to make sure that those groceries, bakeries, and small, markets were not lost because they were faced with incredible burden in terms of being able to pay salaries, reestablishing equipment that might have been damaged. So by keeping these, the local food system alive after the blast, we are also contributing to people being able to access food in those points. So that's one thing that we are working on when it comes to food systems, really making sure that we preserve the existing food system. And then over the longer term, we're working with a very interesting kind of NGO here called Berry Tech, which are supporting actually micro and small businesses and enterprises. And we're trying to identify where in the food system can we intervene to either support, production or the transformation of food or the marketing of food, to really tie all of this together and create a stronger food system. So, of course, this leads to employment for people, but also access to local produce and thereby stimulating the local economy. And then finally, on anticipatory action, this is really about, acting as early as we can when we know that a disaster is coming. So whether it's a flood or a drought, how can we prepare, whether it's through early warning, forecasting capacities, understanding what do we need to do when there is a flood or a drought coming. And of course, that involves working closely with governments, but also local communities to understand how are they coping when there is a flood. Are they leading their animals up the mountains? Are they pre-stocking food and medical items? You know, all of these things that we can try and support. So this is something that we are expanding on in a number of countries in the region, particularly Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and Jordan. And that's thanks to some of the funding from SIDA. So we're very grateful for that. And of course, all of these efforts that I explained, they really require partnership. So working in the SDG facility has been a tremendous help to really connect some of these dots. We don't know everything, of course. And so trying to bring different actors together with different competencies has been a really great pleasure. And we hope to continue that, of course. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Oscar, for that. So if I would summarize that, I would say that perhaps the World Food Programme is running like a full circle where you're providing support to the communities, but also providing relief and resilience to them. And then in the end, you're having this preparedness against future crises. So this is kind of taking a full round on how we can actually support in a way that is sustainable and continuous. Speaking also on that, because this kind of requires a huge amount of funding and financing. Paula, I understand that UNDP is working on a lot of projects, including also the resilience grants that is implementing the climate security nexus on ground. Can you share with us what the project is about, how it tackles the needs of the region from environmental, social, and also financing aspects? And if you can share with us also some good examples on the interventions to improve the resilience through the project.
Yes, thank you, Noral. And so let me start by saying that, I mean, the spirit of the SDG Climate Facility project was exactly that of bringing together integrated solution that could tackle climate resilience, you know, and the effects of climate change, while at the same time also having positive effects on a number of other SDGs. And for this, I would like to join my colleague in thanking SIDA for believing in the approach and allowing us to experiment some of the possible solutions in this area. Now, in terms of UNDP specific contribution to the project, together with our partners here, what we have tried to do is to provide like a pilot resilience grants, which are small in nature because they're pilot, but at the same time, the idea is to catalyze the interest about solutions that can have this kind of multiplier effect on a number of SDGs. And here I would like to build on what Amal and Oscar also said before me, because one of the key elements of these pilot grants was to be community driven. So what we did was actually discuss with the community specific solutions that would work in that specific content and respond to the specific needs of these communities. At the same time, we were also trying to work in practice the humanitarian development peace nexus by looking into solutions that in their nature would also help us coping with some of the main trigger of potential crisis and conflict, so also to have like a kind of like prevention effect. So let me go to like some specific example to try to explain how we try to translate this on the ground. So one example comes from Jordan and is very much responding to the type of analysis that Amal has presented before. The key triggers of human insecurities in Jordan have been identified as like water scarcity. We know that Jordan is like one of the five most water stressed countries in the world. At the same time, also the limited livelihood opportunities is an issue in the country with very high unemployment rates, higher than the region, and including like very high, like up to 40% youth unemployment rate. So what we have tried to do in Jordan is to focus on like 2 governorates in northern Jordan and work with the private sector, with the local private sector there. So we have provided grants to local SMEs to deliver a solution, water solution that could help use and enhance like energy savings and energy efficiency. Basically, like these SMEs have deployed 18 different innovative solutions in this field, and this goes from on-site water reuse, reclaim wastewater system, soil water conservation, and innovative water security technologies. So beside contributing to the issue of local water scarcity, these solutions have also boosted the local private sector. They've helped us promote like jobs and also like water supplies to the local agro-businesses in these regions. So we estimated that this alone has created direct benefits to like 1,300 beneficiaries, either involved with the SMEs or being like their direct beneficiaries, and altogether is supporting around 14,000 people in these local communities. And what we have learned from this very good example is that green recovery, I mean, should go together with inclusive growth, and also like the engagement of the private sector in developing these solutions themselves, can really contribute to something that is more sustainable, but also like scalable potentially and replicable in other places. If I have time to provide just another example in different areas, because I think, just to give a sense of how like different can be the needs and the solution that you develop. Like a similar grant in Palestine was focused on access to energy, instead trying to respond to the needs of local communities there. We know that most of Palestine is dependent on Israel in terms of access to energy, but also that the poor infrastructure are causing like a waste of energy, like equal to like 15 or 25% of what they should actually consume. And this has like a poor impact on local economies, but also the functioning of schools, hospitals. So it's a trigger for several like distress of the communities. So in this case, UNDP has invested in like 2 photovoltaic plants to try to source like energy from the local communities themselves. These 2 plants are being like operated by local companies. And the investment that UNDP provided, partially through the SDG Climate Facility grants and partially by our UNDP country office on the ground, was relatively modest. We're talking about $500,000 in total, but this in itself catalyzed 2.3 million of investment from the local private sector, making the plants themselves sustainable, but also showing how when the local public sector has issues like in operating this type of infrastructure, a partnership with the private sector can be key in solving and addressing the issues of the local communities. I could go on with the other examples, but I want to leave more time to other speakers also to, so we will come back, to some of this work like later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paula, for the examples. And it's really interesting seeing all the work that engages communities, as Amal mentioned, Oscar also mentioned. It's very interesting to see their involvement with that. But also seeing, as you mentioned, the role of the private sector also. And with that, I would like to address specifically the finance industry, perhaps. And maybe Dr. Wadid, I can ask you, with everything that is being said, how can we accelerate the finance towards climate change, and particularly adaptation, seeing that a lot of the inflows into the region are also focused more on the mitigation side?
Thank you very much for this. I will transfer now to Arabic if you'd like to use your earphones. إدارة التنمية المستدامة التعاون الدولي لديها لجنة مهمة هي اللجنة الخاصة بمتابعة تنفيذ أهداف التنمية المستدامة في المنطقة العربية. والحقيقة إنه إحنا كشركاء في المشروع كإدارة لمسنا إن في نجاحات تتحقق في هذا المشروع. ما عرضناها على اللجنة كان في توجه للاستفادة من هذه النجاحات والبناء عليها للمستقبل. النجاحات دي محتاجة مننا لما نفكر في المستقبل يكون تطلعنا الحقيقة مش تقليدي، لازم يكون خارج الصندوق، لأن حجم المشكلات اللي شفناها من خلال المشروع، بل إنه منطقتنا العربية نفسها بطبيعتها المثقلة بالعديد من مشكلات ندرة المياه والتصحر والغذاء وأزماته وعدم المساواة ومشكلات أخرى، بتواجه عقدين صعبين. العقد الأول كان عقد النزاعات، وده العقد اللي تسبب في أزمة كبيرة بتمس على الأقل 2 من كل 5 من المنطقة العربية بمتأثرين بالنزاعات بشكل مباشر أو غير مباشر. كمان عقد تاني بدأنا فيه اسمه عقد الأزمات، وبدأناها بكوفيد ثم حرب أوكرانيا ثم الأزمة الاقتصادية المستمرة. ده خلق في الحقيقة في الإدارة وقدام اللجنة تحدي لما عدد من الملفات اللي الإدارة تبنتها منذ إنشائها في 2016 لمتابعة دعم الدول العربية في تسريع تنفيذ أجندة 2030. ملف النزاعات أصبح ملف هام، ملف الغذاء أصبح ملف هام، وخصوصا مع تصاعد أزمة الغذاء في الفترة الأخيرة كمان. وعلمنا أن هناك احتياج ماس إلى مزيد من الحوكمة وبناء مؤسسات قوية في الدول العربية تقدر أنها تواجه مع كل هذه المشكلات، خاصة مع ضعف البنية التحتية في العديد من الدول العربية. وأنا بقصد بالبنية التحتية حتى منظومة العمل العامة والمؤسسات، كمان بقصد بيها كل المؤسسات على مستوى جميع المستويات. وبالتالي ربط النجاحات في مرفق المناخ اللي تحقق من خلال الشراكات اللي عملناها دعموا معانا في العمل بتاعنا ان تم اعداد اول تقرير عربي بيتناول قضية تحقيق اهداف التنمية المستدامة في الدول المتأثرة بالنزاعات، تلا تحويل هذا التقرير وتوصياته الى لجنة فرعية للتعامل مع النزاعات والازمات في المنطقة العربية. وده بيتطلب مننا نحن نبص على التمويل. إنشاء لجنة خاصة بقضاء على الجوع في المنطقة العربية، وخصوصا في ظل تنامي أزمة الغذاء العالمي اللي تعاقبت الحقيقة 3 مرات على المنطقة، وحاليا بنشهد واحدة من أصعب خصوصا سلاسل الغذاء ثم نظم الغذائية اللي بتحتاج لتغيير. أصبح كمان ده بيتطلب مننا البحث عن تمويل. تشكيل مجموعة عمل للتمويل المستدام وصدور أول تقرير عربي لوضع التمويل المستدام في المنطقة العربية، خاصة تمويل المناخ والطاقة المتجددة. ثم الحاجة إن دولة تطلب مننا إن احنا نعد أول تقرير لدولة، وهو تقرير التمويل المستدام لجمهورية مصر العربية. ده بيوجهنا بيقول هذا الملف يحتاج مننا أيضا الاهتمام ثم تمويل. الحقيقة لما نربط كل الموضوعات دي مع بعضها، إذن التمويل التقليدي أصبح مشكلة، والتمويل بالنظم اللي معروفة عنه أصبحت مشكلة. والتمويل يجب أن يتطلب أن احنا نعيد التنظيم على المؤسسات التنظيمية المالية في الدول العربية والمؤسسات الدولية والمؤسسات المانحة علشان نعيد صياغة رؤية. وده كان الحقيقة هدف الورقة البيضاء اللي احنا قدرنا ان احنا ننفذها بالتعاون من خلال المشروع بتمويل مع سيدا، ان احنا نحقق ورش العمل اللي حكت عليها السفيرة ندى العجيزي. ثم هذه الورقة البيضاء كان اهم ملمح فيها هو انشاء تحالف سياسي مالي تنموي. هدف هذا التحالف انه اللي انشأناه مع الاتحاد الاوروبي، مع البنك الدولي، مع بنك الاستثمار الأوروبي، مع UNDP كشريك استراتيجي، مع البنك الإسلامي للتنمية، وشارك في الورقة البيضاء أكثر من 30 منظمة تنموية أممية وغير أممية. الهدف من كل الحوارات دي إن الجميع معا نستطيع أن نفعل شيء. وأنا أعتقد إن إحنا وصلنا في الورقة دي لرؤية جيدة لتشكيل العمل، لأجندة جديدة حكت عليها السفيرة ندى العجيزي، سميناها حلول مستدامة للأمن البشري. وفكرة الحلول المستدامة للأمن البشري إنها وضعت رؤية تتلخص في عدد من المحاور العمل الأساسية اللي هنشتغل فيها مع بعض لعملية الدي ريسكينج للإنفستمنت. دي ريسكينج للإنفستمنت يعني دعم القطاع الخاص في تمويل استثمارات عالية المخاطر، وإزاي نتعامل مع وضع منطقة عالية المخاطر ويكون هناك تمويل في ظل هذا الظروف الصعبة جدا اللي احنا بنتكلم عليها. أنا أعتقد إنه ده واحد من أهم النجاحات اللي تحققت من خلال كمان المرفق، العمل الميداني مع العمل السياسي مع إيجاد رؤية مستقبلية. أنا أعتقد إن ده نجاح واسع، لأنه كله بيتكامل مع بعضه علشان يتعلم من قضايا العمل وسط المجتمع، ثم نربطها باحتياجات المنظمات الدولية التمويلية والدول العربية اللي شاركت في هذا الحوار بقوة، ثم طلبات اللجنة العربية الرفيعة المستوى للتنمية المستدامة حول تنفيذ هذه الأعمال. وأنا أعتقد أن دور القطاع الخاص في الفترة الجاية يجب أن يتنامى، وده دور معاكم. وأنا هنا بقول معاكم مبادرة التمويل لليونب، وبقول كمان انه ده مع الدول العربيه والمؤسسات التنظيميه الماليه، وبقول كمان انه يحتاج لمنصه رقميه قويه، لانه يجب الا يستبعد احد من هذا الحوار، ويجب ان نصل لجميع ذوي العلاقه في الوطن العربي. والمنصه الرقميه يجب ان تكون هناك وسيله للوصول الى من لا يستطيع المشاركه معنا في الجلسات اللي احنا بنعملها دي. المستفيدين النهائيين اللي احنا المفروض مستهدفينهم هم دولت لازم يكون الدور الرئيسي. اذا النجاح اللي حققناه حتى الآن إن احنا خرجنا فعلا حاليا بستراكتشر كامل لتحالف سياسي تمويلي تنموي. هيبدأ العمل حول حلول مستدامة للأمن الإنساني تتمحور حول الإنسان في المنطقة العربية، وأنا بعتقد إن ده بداية جديدة خارج الصندوق لعمل جديد. وشكرا.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wadid, for that. And it is indeed very important that we have these alliances and task forces that provide some sort of a holistic approach where we bring all the different stakeholders and all the different key players around the same table so that we can assess, as you're mentioning, like the needs and seeing what the financing institutions can provide, and also have it more specific as well to the region. Now that we've seen also what's happening on ground from the field, I would like to go to Dr. Nadim and ask you also from an academic and also from the theoretical side of things, what are your insights on, what can you share with us also on the available research? And also, how can the research institutions and universities accelerate the uptake of the research findings that are available and integrate them into policy planning and the actions on ground?
Thank you, Nuran. We're actually not anymore in our ivory towers. So we're more or less coming down and dealing with reality. A lot of the work that has been discussed here also has its origin in work that is done at universities. And what is encouraging is that local universities are becoming better and better at doing research rather than just classroom instruction, and we're moving forward in that. What we can see in that's happening is that the need for local knowledge and local solutions to local problems are being more and more taken on by universities in the region. There are many examples that we can touch upon. We did, as an American University of Beirut at the climate change program, we did a study that mimics a little bit what Amal has done in Jordan, but we did a comparative analysis on the displacement issue, how climate drives displacement in rural areas. And we compared the Zarqa region to Rashaya and what is the draw on the displacement. And we were able to use techniques that are something like social network analysis or fuzzy cognitive mapping. We have the facility to do these things that maybe agencies that want to work quickly do not have it with them yet, and we can funnel it through because we do have the teams to do that, the knowledge to do that, and take it forward. We have seen more and more development on the use of index-based assessments, where we use data that is collected, and everything is about data these days. So we use data that's collected and integrate that into, or reflect that in something called indices or indicators, sub-indicators that build up to some kind of a scoring mechanism that helps simplify data or convert data to information that decision makers can use. We cannot throw data at decision makers and let them sort it out. So we are able now as universities to come up with scoring, benchmarking certain data to tell them, are we doing well? What does it mean if temperature increases by 1 degree Celsius, 2 degrees? Or how is that reflected? What are the sectors that are impacted? And we can take that forward. Universities now are at the cutting edge of innovation. A lot of the entrepreneurship in smart solutions are spawned through universities. Universities are basically husbanding this and nurturing this ability and sending it out. We are getting slowly, I'm not saying Lebanon, I'm saying everyone. We are getting slowly into the grasping the importance of this partnership between academia and the ability of academia to generate knowledge and support entrepreneurship and innovation in different sectors. And we see this a lot in renewable energy and developments of sensors, and this is reflected in water and in the water sector, and also in firefighting. A lot of the firefighting approaches that we are using are reflected there. So universities have a critical role in developing and generating local knowledge for local solutions. We need to integrate this information. We should, and this is coming down slowly, but it is coming down, the siloed approach to solutions. We need to be at the cutting edge of that, and we're doing it in a bit. We are promoting innovation, and we need to be better at presenting our research to decision makers. My institute its main mandate is to inform policy, to draw on knowledge generated in university, mainly AUB, but then other universities, and funnel that to support decision making. Plus, and then I fall back to what Dr. Wadid said, we need to create this platform for knowledge and also for safe ground for discussion. So this is what we have been doing, and we have we've done a nice job with WFP adapting their clean approach in assessing impact of climate change on livelihood. Well received, I guess, and it is very simple to digest with policy recommendations. So this is where we think we have a good role to play. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nadeem. This is absolutely important. And I do believe that there is a lot of knowledge and intelligence that is also gathered through universities that would be very helpful for institutions to utilize. And it not just that it provides the local lens, as you were mentioning, but it also prevents the duplication of efforts, seeing that there is a lot of work that needs to be done in order to achieve the SDGs and address climate action and all of that. now that we've kind of seen what the scene is in the Arab region, if we can also look at the action-based solutions and the way forward in that sense. My next question, so I'm going to address both of you, Paula and Oscar, because you both are having a joint project and a collaboration. So you're working on the climate security research as well. Would you please tell us more about the initiative, its importance for the region, and the recommendations that can be utilized on the ground?
Yeah, thank you, Nora. So I'll start and then I'll give the floor to Oscar for the details of this. So yes, so thank you so much. I mean, and also building on what we've heard so far, I mean, we are strongly convinced that research, like partnership with academia, with the research center, is very critical for not just providing the right understanding of the issue that we are dealing, but also to co-create and develop jointly, like the right solution that can address the needs of these communities. Now, I mean, I think the starting point here is really like we do understand now better than ever that climate change in itself is a threat multiplier. The impact that climate change has had on multiple aspects of livelihood, but ultimately also like security in this region, I think it's evident. There is like ample evidence, you know, starting from, for example, the drought in 2006 and its effect on Syria, but we have also seen more recently the levels of like displacement and stress that the Horn of Africa, for example, is experiencing. And I would say there are no countries in the region, including the richest one, who are spared actually from the impacts of climate change. So better understanding this risk, but also how policies can help us tackle this risk is exactly the scope of this research. And the aim is really to not just understanding starting from the understanding of how climate-related risks have been already integrated into some of the key processes, policies, but also programs. Also trying to understand what are the costs of integrating this type of analysis and solution in these policies, and what are the benefits in terms of developing integrated solution. So this is basically the core aim of the study that we are developing jointly with WFP and also in partnership with CGR and Adelphi, called Mainstreaming Climate Security and Recovery Pathways. And we have been focusing on like 5 countries in the region. Some of them are also experiencing like conflict, like Yemen, Somalia, and Iraq. But part of the study was also related to Jordan. So we're coming back to like what we were discussing before, where, I mean, the study helped us identify issue in terms of soil, water, and natural resource management that and how they were affecting, for example, food insecurity and through food insecurity, also social cohesion in Jordan. And this has also helped us shape our own like programmatic interventions in the field. And over to you now for.
Thanks a lot, Paula. Maybe just first to just concur with Dr. Nadim. I think, you know, it's a very important message in terms of building that local research capacity, having universities and other think tanks and so on as a safe space. I think that's super important. And I think I remember a discussion, Dr. Walid, a while ago, where we were looking at the number of publications from this region that went to IPCC, for example. It's proportionally quite low if you compare to other regions. And so there is a real need to really make sure that universities and similar actors are, you know, robust enough to talk about the profile of this region and what it means. So I think that's really important and great to sit next to you today. So this research is of course being validated. I think we have a workshop next week to look at it a bit more in detail. But I think primarily it's about recognizing, you know, these links between, you know, conflict and climate. You know, we can no longer sleepwalk, you know, off the cliff of civilization, and because we know that, you know, globally, at least for WFP, 70% of people that are food insecure live in context of conflict. So we know it's a big thing, highly relevant for WFP, but we also know that there are many shortcomings in how we tackle that reality. And I think in this region, of course, each context is unique, but it has not always been a priority to take into account the climate elements when we are in, the aftermath of a conflict. As Paula mentioned, this research really looks at how well are recovery and peace building plans integrating the climate element or not, and what are the costs of not doing that. And of course, we know that if we have peace and we have not been able to improve on the situation before there was a conflict, then what are people returning to? What are the chances of long-term stability? So I think there's a really important message here. Of course, there's an economic argument to be made, but also a human argument to be made, which I think is equally important. I'm hoping, if we look at this, I think there's an element here of financing also, which I hope with COP28 can be at the center for this region. This region is under-financed severely when it comes to the global climate finance mechanisms. And particularly countries that are in conflict. Most of the climate finance kind of actors and agenda is very risk averse to invest in those contexts where, at least we would argue, it's most needed. So that's something that, as we look towards COP28, we really believe we should be tackling heads on. And I understand that UAE also has that on their agenda, and we look forward to supporting that. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Oscar and Paula. It is indeed critical, and one word that you mentioned, actually it's not a word, it's a full sentence. When you're saying the cost of not doing things, I think it's also very important that we don't only look at the cost of things, of addressing climate action, but also look at the cost of not taking any climate action, because this is actually gonna cost even more on the long run. So this is something that we need to keep in mind when we look at initiatives and projects that we perceive as very costly, or as you're mentioning, that include a lot of risks. So having this also long-term or longer-term perspective. A key theme that was evident in this discussion is water. So as the Arab Water Council, I also have to ask you, Amal, how is the Arab Water Council working with partners to create this space in order to kind of mainstream the need for addressing water and food security across the region?
Thank you for the question. And actually, I have to build on what I have been listening, because it was very interesting to see that we are going into the right direction when we started the SDG Climate Facility project. And now we are discussing research, we are discussing investments, we are discussing collaboration between partners from the research, from the UN organizations who are supporting us, from the donors' perspective. So I think we started well and we are moving forward. I would say that when we started to talk about the example of the social vulnerability study in the first question, I have to mention that this study was conducted by the Arab Water Council in collaboration with partners within the project. We had a strong collaboration with the World Food Programme, Cairo office, and also Rome office. We had collaboration from Jordan, UNDP regional office. We had collaboration with universities. So I come back to the important role of universities, as Dr. Nadim mentioned. We also have been discussing with ministries. So when we talk about research to support policies, that was the right direction that we started in only this study. The rest of the other studies, we were talking about the social vulnerability, but we had other important studies, even referring to what you asked me about the gender, because we had an interesting study on the gender climate migration nexus. And this was also supported by the SDG Climate Facility project in collaboration with UN Women. And we also had a case study in Jordan and Sudan. And this brings me to the link to other studies, which is a study related to floods risk assessment in Sudan and trying to develop local plans for resilience of communities. So all the studies at the end are linked together. And I see that we are not working in silos. And I mean by this that you asked me about water. I don't want to talk anymore about water in separation from other important disciplines and coming back to the multidisciplinarity that today when we discuss problems of water or climate change, I think it should be linked to all the other important aspects that are really complicating the problem, I would say. So within the Arab Water Council, we are working in collaboration with partners within the SDG Climate Facility project, and we had great support from all the partners, UNDP, and also I see now that League of Arab States are taking us to the next step where we invest in supporting and finding solutions on the ground in the countries. So the work is in collaboration, I would say, and the key word is collaboration and partnerships. Strengthening partnerships, taking everybody on board, universities, ministries, donors, UN partners, everybody should collaborate. And I see that we have been putting the pieces of the puzzle in this project, and we learned a lot. It was a learning experience for us at the Arab Water Council, and I believe we had a great collaboration that we hope to extend. We didn't stop when we finalized a study, but we took it further. We are not waiting, but we started to develop even proposals for extension of the research, especially with the successful study of the SV, social vulnerability. We had a big package of products out of this study that for us, it's like a pilot study that we want to replicate even on other topics related to climate security. So we developed training programs, we developed online training tool on the methodology that we developed for this study, a lot of informative communication products, papers that we hope to take it further as we see that we are lacking to get our voices as researchers to the important meetings like the COPs, and we are heading to the COP, the next COP. So I hope we can have the products really taken with us to another level. What I can finally mention is that I believe that that was a great experience being in this project, and there is still more to be done. Investment in research is very important, and we see it from the perspective of AWC because our focus is to conduct research that can support better management of water resources in the region and also providing better livelihoods. This cannot be done without research, and as we heard, decision making should be informed decision making based on evidence research. So this is my final words. I will stop here. Thank you very much, and I leave it.
Thank you so much, Amal, for that, and definitely working in collaboration, capacity building, and training and communication. This is very important, and I think when we think of also training with future generations, I think one of the great things in academia is how also the academic scene is changing. I'm looking back and like, I don't know how many years I can say, but we did not have the different majors and universities that address climate change and environmental sciences as we do now. And in speaking of that, and also addressing partnerships and collaborations, what would the academia, for instance, or the universities be expecting of partners and the UN agencies to kind of address what you were mentioning to support the integration of these researches into the actual practice?
A lot is being done. And we've already partnered with WFP. I'm talking about personal experience at AUB. We've partnered with WFP. We've partnered with a regional hub on climate and security analysis, environment and security. So there is this partnership that's burgeoning because it is not only academia that generate information. What's being done on the ground can feed into what we do and how we teach and instruct. Different instruction methods also. I mean, we need to draw on the capabilities of the education departments in our universities so that we can develop instruction material or set up instruction capacity building sessions that are acceptable and palatable. For example, at the American University of Beirut, the Faculty of Agricultural and Food Sciences has been for years working with farmers, and their ability to reach out to farmers is maybe second to none. This can be built on by, and used by UN agencies and support. The thing that we run into as problematic We as universities and university researchers are mainly concerned with publishing. It's a publish or perish life. So if we don't publish, we cannot get promoted and we're shown the door. So to be able to publish, we need to do something that is scientifically relevant. And to balance that, we need to bring in money. And most of the UN agencies do not have funds to sustain research that goes beyond a year. It's just, this year and then stop, and then the next year and then stop. That's problematic. In most cases, that's the case. That's what's happening. So longer term and common research outlooks can be brought together and taken forward. ESC was a great example with RICAR. They used the ACSAD as a partner, and universities can gain a lot from learning to that. But that is a great success for us and a great source of knowledge for us. Maybe we can mimic that and start involving more and more universities to build up the capabilities. And one last point, universities are not only the key. We need to beef up the education systems that support and feed universities with students. We cannot go on with mediocrity in public schools and other schools in terms of elementary and middle schools and then high schools. That needs to rise. And this is where a big chunk of our investment can go in to support environmental awareness and climate action awareness. Thank you.
Thank you so much. For our final question for today's panel, Dr. Wadid, is with all the information that we shared today and the availability of the NDCs and the national adaptation plans and all of this, how can countries utilize them to kind of bring benefits through humanitarian development peace nexus?
أنا في البداية عايز أفاجئ الحضور النهاردة شوية. كلنا بنسمع عن بنك الطعام، وكلنا كلاسيكي بنك الطعام يعني الأكل والأكل اللي بيتبقى منه. الحقيقة رؤيتنا مع بنك الطعام لما جه قاعد مع جامعة الدول العربية وعايز يعمل شراكة اختلفت تماما. احنا نقلنا بنك الطعام انه بيبتدي ينفذ من خلال 80,000 جمعية في المنطقة العربية كلها، كل الدول العربية، لأنه يتعامل مع 14 هدف من أهداف التنمية المستدامة بالنتورك للوصول لكل ذوي الاحتياج. ودي في حد ذاتها أنا بعتبر واحد من الحلول اللي هي بره الصندوق. ونتيجة كده مؤسسة الشيخ محمد بن راشد وقعت معهم اتفاقية إن هم هيمولوا إنشاء منظمة جديدة باسم جديد اسمه معا، وده الاسم اللي احنا بنتكلم عليه، المبادرة العربية للاستدامة، هي اختصارها معا لحياة أفضل. خلي بالنا إنه ده تغيير، هو ده التغيير اللي احنا بندور عليه بره الصندوق. 2 بره الصندوق لما بنتكلم على منصة رقمية لكل ذوي العلاقة بملفات التنمية المستدامة والأمن الإنساني، احنا بنتكلم على الكل يشارك في الرأي، وبالتالي المشروع يطلع مشروع ملكية الجميع والمجتمعات اللي عايزينها، وده موضوع كبير وبنشتغل فيه. لما بنتكلم عن الورقة البيضاء اللي طلعت وبنتكلم على إنها بتتكلم على التمويل المستدام كمحرك لدعم البنوك المركزية من ضمن المستهدفين، لدعم البنوك الخاصة، لدعم المؤسسات التنظيمية المالية للوصول لتمويل مستدام قوي يدعم القطاع الخاص في المنطقة العربية. أنا بعتقد دي نقطة تحول كبيرة في اتجاه حلول مستدامة لكده. لكن أنا عايز أقول بسرعة موضوع خاص بالتريبل نكسس وموضوع خاص بكلايمت سيكيورتي. نحن لا ننتظر حتى يكون التمويل كله مكتمل، وسنبدأ إطلاق مع الإسكوا مشروع قريبا للدول المتأثرة بالنزاعات علشان نبتدي نشتغل مع بعض لصالح الدول المتأثرة بالنزاعات. ونحن لا ننتظر ونعتمد على النجاحات التي تحققت في الفاسيليتي في المرحلة الأولى، ونبدأ مع UNDP حاليا إعداد وثيقة مشروع سيتم تنفيذها مع الدول الأعضاء حول الأمن المناخي في المنطقة العربية. ونحن لا ننتظر، ونحن في حوار مع البنك الدولي ونوى WMO حول بناء منظومات لنظم الإنذار المبكر، لسيناريوهات تطوير السيناريوهات القائمة حول المناخ في المنطقة العربية والجفاف في أوروبا. نحن لا ننتظر، احنا لاحظنا أن الجفاف وصل لأوروبا وبدأنا إنشاء شبكة في مجال إنشاء شبكة للجامعات الأوروبية والجامعات العربية حول هذه الملفات، بطلب كمان بالتعاون من خلال جامعة أوروبية. اللي بقوله التمويل والحلول اللي هي خارج الصندوق للوصول لحلول مستدامة تتطلب مننا ان احنا نكون بنفكر مش بالشكل التقليدي، وان احنا نعمل، لان الحقيقة لا هناك وقت لمزيد من الرؤى والاستراتيجيات بينما المشكلات تتراكم كالجبال حولنا. عشان كده احنا في فترة الحلول والعمل. شكرا.
Thank you so much, Dr. Badid, for this, and thank you everyone for your engagement and participation. We reached the end of our session today, and I'll keep my closing remarks like very brief. And I think we've addressed that there is a need for action, and we're seeing progress happening in the region. With that said, I would like to introduce Ms. Maria Celine, Head of Regional Development Cooperation for the Middle East and North Africa, Swedish Embassy in Jordan. If you would provide the closing remarks for our session today. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Nuran, and thank you to all the panelists here for incredibly interesting interventions. And thank you for inviting me and us, my colleagues and myself from the Embassy in Jordan. We represent, obviously, the Swedish government and SIDA, Development Funding Agency. And we are certainly very proud partners to all of you who have also graciously mentioned our support. So thank you for that. I think obviously you cannot summarize a very rich conversation like this one, but I want to make a few points. Clearly, as Dr. Ghizi was saying initially, setting the scene, I mean, the situation is dire. We have a planet that is growing hotter and drier and with more frequent severe weather events. And I think when Oscar mentions the numbers here, we're talking about 50 million people in severe food crisis, food insecure. And I think the numbers you also mentioned about the food prices rising, it's simply mind-boggling. And I think it really gives you the sense of how urgent the crisis is. And of course, we have overlapping crisis or impacts of the COVID-19 that we're sort of coming out of. But then we have the war in Ukraine, and it's all just coming up to the perfect storm that we're experiencing. So we need a green and we need a just transition. And I think there's been so many solutions and examples of good programs and projects. Paula has highlighted some of them. So I think, you know, we have the solutions very, very much so. We need to get down to work and really implement. And also remember some of the commitments that we've already made, as was said in the beginning. I mean, we have an adaptation agenda from the last COP, and now we're embarking on planning for the next COP. So are we really, you know, doing what we said we're supposed to be doing? We need to certainly see the solutions in a holistic manner. I think many have talked about that. Integrated solutions and holistic views. Stop the working in silos clearly is extremely important. And I was also happy to hear when Dr. Arian mentioned the need to strengthen institutions. I think we talk about climate change, we talk about the crisis, we talk about all of that, but the institutions are the backbones. And if we cannot move away from that sort of fundamental capacity building that is needed, and the governance issues here that are so extremely critical. And in a session yesterday, I was really pushing the point of inclusion, making sure that we really bring all the stakeholders to the decision-making tables and where the policies are shaped and formed. And I was encouraged to hear that, if I understood it correctly, the UN Secretary General had just now taken the initiative to really make sure that young people, that youth are at the table in Dubai when COP28 is underway there. I think that's extremely important. We're talking about the future here. And moving on, I think financing clearly has been mentioned probably in all the sessions during this conference. And representing a donor, clearly we have a role to play. But the kind of funding that's coming from us and other development partners is not by any means enough. So we must make sure that we can be catalytical in our approaches. And I think Paula also mentioned how the grant funding that we've been providing from Sweden could actually unlock private funding. And I think that is, we have to move in that direction more and really make sure that we unlock the private capital. And with the funding that we can provide, that can be a vehicle for that. Otherwise, it's just not going to be enough. And Oscar was highlighting that the region is already underfunded. And I fear that we're not going to see a bigger funding envelope in the years to come. So we need to be smarter, work more together, and finding alliances for creative and innovative funding. So I don't want to draw on out on this. I just want to say that, again, it's that sense of urgency. We're soon going back to Amman, as was said. Jordan is one of the most water scarce countries, and we're always reminded there of the sense of urgency. Again, how we need to work together. I think it was mentioned here that we cannot just talk about water. We need to look at all the different sectors and see how we can work multidisciplinary. I mentioned the financing. I was really interested to hear also from the colleague from AAB here in Beirut that, you've what did you say? You've climbed down from the ivory towers, but really making use of relevant research. And I'm pleased to say that we've been in different ways from the Swedish side supporting that. We need research, but we also need to apply it, and we need to take it to the decision makers. And collaboration is obviously the key word here. We need to get our act together, and Sweden is certainly a partner in this endeavor. So I thank you very much for this very interesting session. And I have to say, excellent moderation, but Nuran, I think you would all agree. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much to everyone for today's discussion, for your time and the great attention. And thanks to everyone for the great remarks. We kind of skipped a question in the Q&A's part. Please.
شكرا سيدة نوران لإدارتك المتميزة الحقيقة لهذه الجلسة. شكر موصول لكل المتحدثين. الحقيقة لا أريد أن أطيل لأن الوقت انتهى، لكنني أريد أن ألتقط ما ذكره صديقي العزيز الدكتور وديد بأن الوقت يداهمنا. بالأمس تعرضت في الجلسة الدائرة المستديرة حول الاستعراضات الوطنية وقلت أنه قد مضى 7 سنوات لم نحقق فيها في المنطقة العربية ما يريده المواطن العربي في تحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة. بالتالي يجب علينا أن نتدارك أنفسنا وأن نحاول بقدر الإمكان القفز وبقوة، ولا نريد أن تكون أهداف التنمية المستدامة ترفا فكريا. الحقيقة هناك جهود كثيرة بذلت، تقارير أعدت من جامعة الدول العربية ومن إدارة التنمية المستدامة ومن اللجان التي عملت عمل متميز دكتور نديم ذكر أن الجامعات بدأت تشتغل على بحوث وغير ذلك فيما يتعلق بأهداف التنمية، لكن كل ذلك يجعلنا فعلا أن المواطن العربي سيحس بأن أهداف التنمية المستدامة هي فقط في البحوث في الجامعات وفي التقارير التي تعدها المؤسسات، وأن ذلك كما تعودنا أن هذه البحوث ستكون في الأدراج ولا يمكن تحقيقها. يجب علينا أن نتحرك، وأنا هنا أدعو السفيرة دكتورة ندى أن تتبنى فكرة جديدة. عملنا منفردين على في مستوى الدول العربية ولم نحقق شيء. يجب علينا أن نفكر في عمل مشترك عربي. لدينا الموارد الطبيعية، لدينا موارد المالية، لدينا كل الإمكانيات، لكن عندما نشترك جميعا في عمل مشترك يحقق الأمن الغذائي ويحقق الأمن الطاقة ويحقق أمن المائي ويحقق أمن المناخ، بهذا فعلا نستطيع أن نتدارك أنفسنا خلال ال7 سنوات المتبقية على أهداف التنمية المستدامة. أنا أملي كبير دكتورة ندى في تبني هذه الفكرة ونصل فعلا وخصوصا أن الدكتور وديد ذكر بأن هناك فعلا تحالف، وهذا التحالف مهم جدا، سياسي تنموي مالي. إذن هناك تتداخل ما بين السياسة والمال والتنمية. نريد منكم الحقيقة أن تتبنوا هذه الفكرة، وأنا على ثقة كبيرة في دكتورة ندى. شكرا دكتور.
اسمحي لي نوران، بشكر طبعا صديقنا الدكتور طاهر من ليبيا، ممثل ليبيا في اللجنة. أنا بأعدك أنا شخصيا يعني ملتزمة بهذا الموضوع، وفعلا إحنا بنعمل زي ما دكتور وديد قال كل جهدنا إن إحنا نلاقي أفكار جديدة ومبتكرة خارج الصندوق، هدفها إن إحنا فعلا زي ما حضرتك بتقول المواطن يحس، مش إن إحنا يعني كفاية كلام وده جاء وقت التنفيذ والخطر بيداهم الجميع. فإن شاء الله التحالف اللي احنا بنسعى إليه بكل قوتنا، احنا واثقين في دعم الدول لنا في اللجنة، وده شيء بيطمنا وبيخلينا نقدر نتحرك. لكن فعلا احنا بنحاول برضو كما ذكرت السيدة ماريا ان احنا نلاقي طرق مبتكرة للتمويل. هم ممكن يساعدونا يمكن بحاجة بسيطة، لكن احنا لازم نلاقي طرق مبتكرة عن طريق القطاع الخاص، عن طريق المنظمات الفيلانثروبي اللي موجودة، عن طريق الصناديق السيادية يمكن نقدر نعمل حاجة. لكن هو ده فعلا هدفنا الفترة القادمة. شكرا.